Hi, my name is Nicole. I'm here at the Pearl Review, my new YouTube channel. I'm doing a series on classics and personal favorites for those who are considering reading these books, and just going over why I think they're special. So today I'd like to talk about Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. Right off the bat, I'd just like to say that I think George Orwell's fiction and nonfiction should be considered, on equal footing. I think it's a crime that his nonfiction is not as famous as his fiction, as works like 1984 and Animal Farm. Homage to Catalonia is one of the greatest wartime memoirs. It's some of the best literature about war you will ever find. I love this book. I think it's phenomenal. So let's just get into a bit of a garbled, probably, synopsis of the book. George Orwell enlists in the Spanish Civil War because he wants to go fight fascists. The Spanish Civil War is the major precursor to World War II. It's the first major arena where communists are fighting against fascists. Western European countries are also, sending in troops to help, and that's where George Orwell comes in. He doesn't know a lot about Spain. He doesn't know the historical context of the war. He doesn't realize how factionalized the war is, that there's many different militias that are fighting against the fascists. He just goes in. So he winds up being signed up with the POUM. It's the Marxist militia. And he doesn't do that for any, significant reason. He winds up being stationed in a very sleepy post for several months of the war. Then he goes on leave to Barcelona with his wife for a few days, and while he's there, there's this major fight that breaks out against the communist militia, which is one of the major forces of the war, and his Marxist militia. Now, they're supposed to be partners. They're supposed to be working alongside to fight the common enemy. But basically, the communist militia seems to swallow up the Marxist one. There seems to be some staging of engineering of a sort of fall for the Marxist militia to take in the fighting in Barcelona. And subsequently, the Marxist militia becomes illegal overnight. It's like a light switch kind of moment. And automatically, immediately, these people are, So overnight, basically, the Marxist militia become part of the enemy. People are taken into jail and shot. And Orwell and his wife narrowly escape. And they successfully flee to France. Sorry if the lighting or anything is different. My neighbors are blasting Blue Oyster Cult. Orwell is not a totally reliable narrator. He comes into the war ignorant, and he leaves, barely speaking the Spanish language. So there's things that he did not pick up on. There's a great article that I will link below that just goes over some of the inaccuracies in the book. However, that's not to deter you. This book is fantastic, and I think Orwell is a brilliant person. He just tried to honestly tell what was happening, and share his experience. He even calls out the liberal journalists during his time that did a disservice in describing the war. This was really a formative moment for George Orwell. This is the first time he's seeing these, big political monsters and machines at work, and the cruelty of his time. This helped make him one of the great commentators of his own era. What's really striking, though, about this book is his description of day-to-day life as a soldier in a long, drawn-out war. He describes lack of food, lack of sleep, being too cold, not having the right clothes, being full of fleas and getting sick, the boredom, the mangy part of the war he describes so well. And there's this great comedy to his descriptions as well, because George Orwell was a highly educated, stiff guy, very British, very privileged, that even some of the English soldiers fighting alongside him didn't really like him that much. And they thought that he didn't even like the people who he was working with, these young, uneducated Spanish militiamen. But actually he had a great empathy for these people. And Orwell's, interplay between him and the people he's with is just a little absurd, and he knows it's absurd. The militia is heavily underfunded. It's very ragtag. He gets a gun that's over 40 years old. It's from the 1890s. It's a German Mauser. And when he's asked to be trained how to shoot and how to use it, his superiors always say mañana, tomorrow. So there's little training, there's a lot of ineptitude. There's a lot of waiting around. But he also describes, the short moments of, fighting very well too. Orwell actually narrowly escapes death at one point, 2/3 of the way in the novel, or in the memoir, I should say. And it's a fantastic thing to learn about Orwell. It's really a miracle that he lived. I'm not going to give away what happens, but it's really interesting. This book really makes wartime Spain interesting. There's just so much that's going on. There's so many different groups. There's, he talks about the anarchist peasants. He talks about the real feeling of revolution that starts the war, and how that gets corrupted, and how that changes, and how disappointed he can be in the war. However, what's refreshing also about this book is that Orwell leaves with a greater sense of humanity. He's not, he definitely has his cynical side, but it doesn't ruin him. Like I said, I think Orwell is one of the great thinkers of his own time. He's a great essayist. He's a great journalist. He made his career in journalism before writing his novels. So his style is evident in his nonfiction as well. And I think he really brings to life a war that most people don't know a lot about, but he also touches upon the universal aspects of war. I've seen people say that this book is just as valuable as War and Peace in terms of his descriptions of war. So I really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend it to anyone who's curious about Orwell or about the Spanish Civil War. If you've read this book, if you've liked it, if you've hated it, if you wanted to share your thoughts on the book, please comment below, and thank you so much for listening.